Anyway, seriously, the second thing on the program this morning, you have a delegation. We have a delegation from Property Valuation Services Corporation. And I know the CBRM residents will be interested in this because a few weeks ago, if you went to your mailbox, you did find an envelope there with maybe your assessment in there. So we've decided this evening to have a delegation. We really appreciate it. It's very timely for us. And I think before we start that I think a representative on the Property Valuation Services Board, Kevin Zakery, had something to add. Kevin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'd like to welcome our people from Property Valuation Services. And it's been a learning curve for me, and I think it was extremely important for our residents to be educated on sometimes can be a complicated issue when it comes to property assessments. Some people have questions about the CAP program, how it works. For instance, what will be in the presentation is when someone sells a house, then the cap is lifted, that sort of stuff. So I've asked at the board level for them to come and do a presentation in January this month, in particular because the assessments were out. They recently did a presentation before HRM as late as about a week and a half ago, and they also found that very informative. What I would suggest to the viewing public, that if you have your assessment notice in your mailbox or you have it in your home, have a look at it, and if you have any questions, watch this presentation because it's extremely important. These are very well educated people in terms of they have some very important information that they would like to relay, and if anybody is watching that you hear somebody else that may have complained about the concerns, don't wait until you get your tax bill in April or May. Have a look at your assessment now, and then listen to this information, and then try to correlate that information with what your issue might be, and you could actually have that resolved here this evening. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. So we have here this evening, I believe, not necessarily order, but I think Trudy LeBlanc, who's the Senior Municipal Advisor, and we also have Lloyd McLeod, of course, who we all know around the Glace Bay area, who's the Commercial Manager, and we also have Diane Beaton, who's the Area Manager. So they can go in whichever order they want, and I think Trudy's going to go first, so I'll turn it over to you, Trudy.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity to come to CBRM and present. Certainly want to bring my attention to the young group that preceded us. What an inspiring group, and it's going to be a pretty hard act to follow, I must say. So congratulations to you young people. It is very difficult to stand up and speak in front of a group sometimes. So again, thank you for taking for allowing us the opportunity to come before you and speak. I'm going to go through very briefly PVSC background, and that will give you an opportunity to get to some questions and answers at the end. We're also going to talk about the mandate, the CAPT assessment program, assessment process, and the 2015 assessment roll, followed by questions. So as many of you know, Property Valuation Services Corporation is a municipally funded, independent, not-for-profit organization that provides assessment services for not only the 54 municipal units, but also 600,000 property owners. We provide the assessment notices for the 600 plus property owners in the province of Nova Scotia. So PVSC was created in 2008, and formerly it was the assessment services were provided to the Nova Scotia residents through the assessment services of Service Nova Scotia Municipal Relations. We're governed by a board of directors. We have 5 elected municipal officials on there, 2 municipal administrators, 3 independent directors, and the executive assistant from the UNSM. We have 140 employees across 7 regional offices, and a budget of $17.1 million. And I'd like to highlight that this is the 4th consecutive year in which we haven't increased our budget, understanding and realizing that municipalities across the province are facing many fiscal challenges. So just to draw a little bit of focus on our budget, you can see the largest portion of our budget is spent on salary and benefits, 69%, and our IT operations is at 7%. So we rely very heavily on our staff and our IT. So recently, the Board of Directors approved our strategic direction for the next 5 years. So going forward in 2015 to 2020, there are 3 areas of focus. One is strengthening our business by improving our processes, products, and our people. The second area of focus is opening our data to others, and by that we wish to create new opportunities through increasing access to property-related data. I want to speak a little bit more about that in the next couple of slides. And the third area of focus is to broaden our services. And so we would like to offer our clients a range of personalized services beyond our core assessment values, and that would be through technology and through partnerships. One of the focuses that we'd like to highlight is a new initiative called Open Data. While it's not really new, it's quite a buzzword now that a lot of companies and organizations, and you're reading a lot about open data in the media. Open data is basically data that can be freely used, reused, redistributed by anyone. So information is put out there for people to use in many formats and for many different purposes. Open data supports transparency and accountability because the data is put out there, and once it's there, people can use it, they can see it. So it allows people to understand and to see exactly what those numbers and what those what that information is. It can also be used for economic development. In many instances, there are individuals who are using open data to develop software applications, for example, and other businesses where they're taking data, using it in many different manners and creating other information with it. It's being used for research and innovation, and it's also being used for information sharing. One of the things that I'd like to also make mention now is I'd like to recognize CBRM for sharing in a number of initiatives with us as far as data sharing goes. They were key partners with us with the e-delivery, which is the electronic delivery of your tax notices, which will be coming up in the spring, and also partnering with us as far as your assessment notices go. So as of January, anybody who wishes to receive their assessment notice can do so now through electronic delivery of mail. And also the permit data exchange project. Now that's a project where we're looking at exchanging permit data, so it's building permit and demolition permit data. That's in its very early stages at this time, but CBRM certainly has been involved with us with that as well. So background and current state of open data. In 2012, the Open Data Working Group was established through the Property Innovation Council, and basically it was established to develop a greater understanding of open data and to discuss the potential opportunities, benefits, and risks as far as how to share that data. So in 2013, they completed a study to identify key factors that encouraged or inhibited public inquiry initiatives, and they're currently seeking to formalize that group through a memorandum of understanding. One of the things that we'd like to also bring to both the people, the general public who may be at home, or to CBRM counselors, is the website. So currently our website, we've been building our website, trying to provide access to information for the public, and we've tried to improve our client access to information. So we've currently updated our My Property report, which is available to all property owners. It gives them a broader understanding and a lot of detail about their specific property assessment themselves, individual to them. We've also have made it more user-friendly. We've aligned it with other jurisdictions, and we're looking to create opportunities for additional products and services. Some of the information that's available on our website, just for those of you who haven't gone in to look and may be of interest. As of 2012, you can see that then there were a number of data sets that were available on the website. But if you look at as of October 2014, we've added approximately 10 pieces of additional data that is able to be viewed by anybody looking at the website themselves. And as of January 2015, we've put the current taxable assessed value on there. So that's the value that if somebody's looking to understand what will I be taxed on, that's the value that they'll be taxed on. So we're trying to improve it, and we hope that people will go and use our website for a number of reasons, even if it's to look out to before they call us to see what kind of information that we have. We wish to have the correct data on there. So if there's something on there that isn't correct, please call us, let us know, and we'd like to have that information as relevant as we can. So I'm going to turn it over now to Lloyd, who'll go through the mandate and the assessment role with you.
Thank you, Trudy. I'd like to also mention that Dave Penny is with us tonight. Dave is the residential supervisor in the Sydney office. Okay, the PVSC mandate. So our mandate is legislated through the Nova Scotia Assessment Act and the Property Valuation Services Act. And probably the most important section for assessment is Section 42 of the Assessment Act, which states that all property should be assessed at its market value, and that value is the value that a willing buyer would pay to a willing seller. So under the Assessment Act, we're required to assess all properties in Nova Scotia, so that includes all exempt properties and taxable properties. We provide the assessment roll to all the 54 municipalities in Nova Scotia. We provide assessment notices to all the property owners. Your market value that's determined by the assessment office can be appealed on a yearly basis. We also administer the property appeal process as dictated by the Act. Okay, the capped assessment program. The capped assessment came into existence in 2005, and it's a result of provincial legislation, and it was really brought in to address the concerns over rapidly increasing assessments and sudden and dramatic increases in market value. The cap rate is based on the Nova Scotia Consumer Price Index, and the residential property taxes are based on the lesser of the value. So if your capped assessment is lower than your market value, then you pay based on the capped assessment. And for 2015, the cap rate is 2.1%. Okay, so to be eligible to qualify for the cap, the annual increase in market value has to be greater than the Nova Scotia Consumer Price Index. At least 50% of your property has to be owned by a Nova Scotia resident. Residential properties with less than 4 dwelling units or a vacant resource. If it transfers, the ownership must remain within the family. Owner-occupied condominiums qualify. Mobile homes qualify. Mobile home parks, cooperative housing, residential and resource portions of commercial farms. So the properties that are not eligible, of course, are properties that are owned by out-of-province residents. Commercial properties are not capped. New construction is not capped. So in the case of new construction, if you add a piece onto your house, the original piece is capped and the new construction is not capped for the first year. You're not eligible if you're a new homeowner and it's a non-family transaction. So if you buy a house from me, that first year your home is not capped. And non-owner occupied condominiums are also not capped. Okay, as I stated earlier, Section 42 of the Assessment Act dictates really how we assess properties, and that's at market value. But one of the most important aspects of that section also dictates that the Director of Assessment choose a base date for the valuation. So for January 1/15, the base date for this year is January 1, 2013. So what that means is we're reflecting what the value of your home was January 1, 2013. So what we do there is we look at sales on either side of, from July of 2012, 6 months, and then on 6 months on the other side of January 13. The other important factor that plays in hand is the state of the property, or what we refer to as the state date. And that's a little different than a base date, whereas the base date we're 2 years behind. The state date of your property is actually the state of your property when we file the roll. So for 2015, that'd be the state of your property December 1, 2014. And the reason for that is, of course, is that we'd pick up any changes that occur on a property. So if you built a piece on, we would add that on for 2015. So that's really where the state comes in, or it could be the opposite. Your house could burn down or anything that affects the overall value of the house. That's the state of the physical state of the property. So for the analysis for 2015, what we do, as I said, we look at 6 months on either side of January 1, 2013, and we review all the sales that happen within that base date. So we take all the residential sales, we take all the commercial sales, and we basically, what we call investigate the sale. So what we're trying to do is determine if it's an arm's length transaction. So if it's a sale between a willing buyer and a willing seller, and that there's nothing else involved in the sale price besides what's on the affidavit. So in CBRM, there were, in that time frame, there was 1,061 residential sales. There were 3 apartment sales, and commercial, there were 33, and I should clear this, these are what we call qualified sales. Now, there'd be a lot more sales in this, but many of them would be family transactions, could be intercompany sales, $0 and $1 sales for different reasons. And if the apartment sales look low at 3, there were probably more apartments than that, but when we talk in terms of apartments, we talk about 4 units and up. So after we look at all the sales, what we do is we analyze, we first take the land values that we set throughout CBRM, and we look at any land, vacant land sales that we may have, and we review all the land settings that we have across CBRM to determine if any should be changed based on sales that we've received. After that, we will look at every year on a yearly basis for our income properties, such as apartments that are over 4 units, multi-tenant office buildings, your Commerce Tower, your shopping centers, the Mayflower Mall. What we do on a yearly basis is we send out a request for information, for financial information, and that information, when it's returned, is used to value the properties. The other thing, of course, we do on a yearly basis is we inspect all the building permits that take place in CBRM. Okay, once people get their assessment notices, which they have now, we go into what we call the appeal process, where people can appeal. And right now we have most of our staff are all on phones now, taking calls from inquiries. We encourage anybody that has any questions relating to their assessments to call up and find out what the basis of their assessment is. And if they're not satisfied, or they feel that their value is too high, they have the right to appeal it. So they can appeal the value, they can appeal the classification in terms of we have it on commercial and it's no longer used commercial. It's like sometimes we might have a hairdresser shop in a home, so a portion of that home is on commercial. The person may appeal their home and appeal the assessment and say, we no longer operate, it's 100% residential now. The other thing you can appeal, of course, is the ownership, if your property transferred and we don't, and it's not in the correct name. You now have, everybody has 31 days to appeal. The appeal period is January 9th, which is when the notices went out, to midnight February the 9th, 2015. So what will happen is when the appeals come in, we'll have an assessor, we'll review the appeal and the assessment. In most cases, they will contact the owner if need be to discuss it. The assessor at that point has two options. He can either confirm the assessment and say that in his opinion the value is correct, or he can make a recommendation to change the assessment. So if the assessor makes a determination that to confirm the assessment that's appealed, the ratepayer still has, of course, the right to go further with the appeal. But as I said, we encourage all your, if you receive any calls about assessments, we would encourage them to call the office and speak to one of the assessors first to go over their assessment. And the other thing is, this year, as Trudy mentioned, they can you can get more information now. They can view the detailed information about their property by looking at the My Property report. So every assessment notice that goes out now has a PIN number so that they can access their own information. So as I said, the appeal process, it's a pretty simple process. Everybody has the right to appeal, as long as you own the property or you live within the municipality. So once you file the appeal, PVSC will review it. If you're not happy with that review, it would then go on to the Nova Scotia Appeal Tribunal. And then if you're still not satisfied at that point, from the appeal tribunal, you would have the ultimate opportunity to go to the Nova Scotia Utility Review Board. So the next slide looks at what's happening for 2015 in CBRM. So the total CBRM assessment roll for 2015 is $6.3 billion, which is a 2.7% increase from last year. The breakdown is residential, $4.8 billion, which is 3.4%. The commercial increase is $1.5 billion, which is 0.5%. And the residential with cap is $3.8 billion, which is 3.5%. One thing to keep in mind in the increase that you're seeing there, that is a combination of market and new construction. So on the residential side, that doesn't mean everybody's property's going up 3.4%. There's a market increase there, plus all new construction is included in that figure. And that would be the same on the commercial side also. So provincially, the total assessment is $101.8 billion. The residential assessment is $78.7 billion. Residential with cap is $69.4 billion, and the total commercial assessment for the province is $23 billion. Now, the next slide just gives you a breakdown on provincial, and we're broken down into 4 geographic areas, and the south would be, I don't know if you can see the, do you see the map? You can see the map, so that would be, the south is Work Unit 1, what we refer to Work Unit 1, which is the South Shore. So the residential assessment there is $10.5 billion, and the residential with cap is $9.4 billion. The total commercial is $2.1 billion, and the total assessment is $12.6 billion. HRM, which is Work Unit 2, the residential assessment is $40 billion. The residential with cap is $35.4 billion. Commercial assessment is $13.3 billion, and the total is $53.3 billion. The East, which takes in CBRM and IRV, or Inverness, Richmond, Victoria, Antigonish County, and the Pictou-Glasgow area, the total residential is $12.8 billion. The residential with cap is $10.9 billion. The commercial assessment is $4.1 billion, and the total assessment is $16.9 billion. The Northwest, which takes in the center part of the province, the Truro area, and right up to Amherst and down through the valley, the total residential is $15.4 billion. Residential with cap is $13.7 billion. The commercial assessment is $3.5 billion, and the total assessment is $18.9 billion. Now, that's all I have to present. If anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to try to answer them for you.
Thank you very much, Mr. McLeod. We have some questions from the councillors. Councillor Claire Dethridge first.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I had a headache before I came here tonight, just to let you know. I did receive a fair number of phone calls on assessments since the bill, and I hope they all have been calling you because I was of no help to them. I have one question before I get on the tax side of things, and that is, one call I had yesterday was with regard to a home transfer. If I was transferring my home to my nephew, would the cap go with the home?
No.
Or it wouldn't,
No.
would it? Okay, that's easy. All right, I'll go back to the tax side of things. I guess every time you come here, and I think every time I talk to you, I talk about the cap and the unfair system that it is. I think it's the worst thing that the provincial government ever burdened us with. If you look on page 24 here in CBRM, the total assessment, $6.3 billion, residential 4.8, 1.5, but if the residential with cap is 3.8.
Yeah.
I have people that call me that are literally crying because they can't afford the taxes and don't realize it when they buy a home, because nobody is telling them that the cap is coming off. They don't even know what the cap is about. Nobody tells them that either. And all of a sudden, they make this purchase, and what they thought was $2,500, $2,600 in taxes all of a sudden becomes $5 to $8 or more, depending on where they're at. We have homes all over this municipality that are up for sale that are never going to sell the way it is. We're chasing our young people. We have so much out migration here, and I know neither of you have any control over this. And I guess I don't have a specific question, but it's hard to take. And I vented every chance I get for people to make themselves aware. I just put that out to people that are looking at buying homes. Be careful what kind of a hornet's nest you're getting into. And I don't mean to scare people from buying homes, but know what's ahead of you. Know if you can afford those bills before you make that purchase or build that new home that you thought was, you know, $300,000. Oh, mediocre rent on that, and all of a sudden the taxes are, real tax bills come in, because they get the first tax bill, oh, they're smiling, and then all of a sudden the real one comes. And we have through UNSM, we have asked the real estate agents out there, we've tried to apply with them, with the banks, the local banks. I have talked to managers, I think at just about every bank in Sydney and Sydney River, just trying to tell them, look, you know, before you make this deal, do that for them. Boy, they're not doing it, Lloyd and Trudy. Like, it's just, it's unreal what's happening out there. And people get themselves into some awful messes, and it's a hard enough time that we're going through now. And I meant to welcome you too, Trudy, to Cape Breton, or to CBRM. I guess, really, I really don't have any questions, but I just felt I had a vent, and every time I vent, I just hope that there's somebody out there that's listening and will take heed or pass it on to someone else when they're buying a home or doing that exchange. So, but thank you both for coming in tonight, and thank your colleagues also for coming along. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dethridge. We'll recognize Councillor Clarence Prince.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Well, I guess we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about the CAP program, because every one of us realized that it was the province who initiated it, and it's only the province that can take it off. But staff and municipal units, we can certainly understand the public being happy with the CAP program because they pay lower taxes, but I guess it's important for them to realize that it causes a serious drop in our municipal revenue stream, and actually it costs us less, it affords us less money to give them programs that they actually demand and expect. But getting back to the appeal process, 2 quick questions. It's been said before that the appeal period, 31 days, is not really enough time. And do you think that time frame, maybe I'm asking you, you're going to say yes, but is that time frame sufficient?
I think it is, but I mean, I've been around assessment for 32 years, and it used to be 21 days. So we have, just over the last 2 years that we've actually increased it, and we had to have legislation change to do that, and we increased it to the 31 days. So I think, you know, most people that, what usually happens if somebody misses the appeal period, it wouldn't matter if it was 2 months, because the people that miss generally are calling when their tax bill comes. That's, you know, kind of my experience, right? So I think the 31 days, I mean, certainly 31 days is a lot better than 21.
Certainly.
That it was. You know, that's the improvement that we did ask for legislation to be changed, and we had to change to that.
And maybe the answer, I should know this, I guess, but the appeal process itself, you have the file the appeal, and they would go with the PVSC appeal review. If they're still not satisfied, you can go to the 2 other steps, the assessment appeal in Nova Scotia or the NS Utility Review Board.
Yes.
If anybody here, or anybody, but I'll talk about here now, when it gets to those final 2 stages, if they indeed do decide to go further, are those hearings held in the local area, and is there any cost to the applicant?
Yeah, no, they're held in the local area. They'd be held right here.
And there'd be no cost to them unless they get a lawyer or
No
something like
cost to
that?
them, no. No, the first process, the tribunal is very informal.
Right.
It's the chairman are local people. There's a local, two local lawyers. It's very informal. They just come in, state their case, and that's the end of it. And even at the next stage, even at the Utility Review Board, there's very few cases where lawyers are involved. And we will only get a lawyer, we will only ask our lawyer to come if the other side is going to have a lawyer. So if you appealed your property to the Utility Review Board, and you're just going to go and present your case, then I would just go present ours. I
Okay.
wouldn't ask for our lawyer to come down for that. It's, just gets to be, the only time we do ask our lawyer to get involved, if there is going to be a lawyer, because, you know, you can be at a disadvantage, of course, when you get into legal
Sure.
things like that. The other thing I'd like to say about the appeal process is that, you know, what we're trying to do is put more information out there. And as Trudy said, with the open data and the more information on the PIN reports, sales now, you can now look at sales online that have happened over the last couple of years. And the other thing we did this year was a preliminary assessment. So people actually had the opportunity to, I believe in October, to see what their they could have went online and saw what their assessment was for 2015. And if you had a concern then, we were encouraging people to call, because really, we'd like to avoid appeals if we can, because quite frankly, you know, it's administrative.
Yes.
You know, if you can deal with properties before the roll is filed, it's a lot less work, to be quite honest, right? Just from an administrative point of view, right? And the assessors are more than happy. They'll go out and look at your property if you want them to go out and look at it, or if you want to come in, you know, you can do that. And I would encourage any of you, if any of you are interested in knowing what exactly is going on in the area that you represent, feel free to come in. Dave will, you know, sit down with any one of you, take you through the what's happening in your particular area. We have all the areas broken out by neighborhood. So that's the other thing we do with sales. All those sales that we review, not only do we break them down into Sydney and Waterford and Glace Bay, but within those communities, we break them down into neighborhoods. So first thing we do is try to look at all the sales that happen in this particular neighborhood. That gives us a better idea to fine tune it more.
Thank you, Councillor Prince. Recognize Councillor Eldon McDonald.
Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor. Thanks very much, Lloyd, for coming in this evening, and Trudy. This is, other councillors have already said, is a very frustrating issue for both elected officials around the table and, of course, our residents that get these notices in regards to particular home sales when the cap comes off and they're not prepared for the extreme spike that they see happen in their tax rates. And I look at page 25 here in our document in regards to, you have it broken down, the south, the HRM, the east, and the north. And looking at the residential assessed value at 12.8, and of that 12.8, 10.9 is capped. So we have about 1 billion that's not capped and 10 that is. And I look at the revenue source of our municipality and a struggling municipality, and with the cap program in place, and I can be corrected if I'm wrong, and Marie, through you, Deputy Mayor, if my numbers are wrong or somewhere in the vicinity, I think it costs our municipality about $20 million. I think last year I believe it was around $17 million annually that we don't collect in tax revenue from residential properties. That's problemsome for myself in regards to trying to fix our streets, fix our infrastructure. We read not long ago about pipes underground that are losing 40% of water and stuff of this nature. Whether that's accurate or not accurate, it definitely tells a story about our infrastructure. And of course it takes money to do that. Just in reference to comments that Councillor Dethridge made about the program, and it's a provincial program. Well, I look at it on two occasions. If we have two programs that don't work. We have an equalization program that, going by the provincial numbers, costs us about $20 million less than what we should be getting. And now we're looking at a cap program that is put in place by the provincial government that's costing us about $20 million. So that's $40 million in total that two programs in this provincial government are putting against municipalities that are struggling with revenue. And that is shameful. I don't know if the PVSC themselves advocate to the province that this system is a train wreck, and the longer it goes on, the worse it's going to get. And I'm not sure if that's the message that you deliver to the province, but that's where we're headed in my opinion. If we're 17 million last year and 20 million this year, where are we going to be next year, 23? In 5 years' time, are we going to be $35 million less? and that's the province thinks that that's a sustainable system. This province has to look at and take bold change in this taxed cap system that they put in place. And I would encourage yourself and anybody else to speak about to the province and the officials that put this process in place to make them understand that this process doesn't work. It's just not working. I have young couples calling me and telling me they're moving out of this municipality because we're killing them. Because when they bought their house, it was $1,800, now it's $4,000. They wake up the next day to sticker shock. That can't continue. People are leaving this province. It's not about leaving CBRM, it's about leaving Nova Scotia. And when this continues, it's only going to be a burden on Nova Scotia. It's not going to be a burden on CBRM, it's going to be a burden on Yarmouth and Pictou and Truro and HRM and everybody else. So that's, I get very frustrated with the issue of the lack of our ability of a municipality to engage with a provincial government to sit down and look at various situations that are happening across this municipality and make them right, so that we all win, we all grow, and we become a stronger province. And that message has to be delivered, whether it's through this council or through PVSC. But there's serious problems with revenue, and this is one of them. And I'll just leave it at that as far as comments. I'm just wondering in regards to education, we talk about who, residents aren't aware. Residents don't know that when they buy a house tomorrow morning, their taxes are going to, whose job is it to educate that resident? Is it PVSC? Is it the provincial government because it's their program? Right. And I'll just, because my time's going to run out. So that would be two questions, I guess. Wondering on the advocacy that your organization would do to the province to, in my opinion, tell them there's a train wreck coming. And in regards to the education, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Well, just a two things. One is in terms of what PVSC has done in terms of the cap. I mean, we've been involved with sponsoring and being involved with the tax study that was presented to the province and the UNSM, of course. And the other thing about education and the cap program is that we have made attempts to educate the real estate sector across Nova Scotia. We've held meetings with them. We've had a meeting over at the Cambridge Suites, I guess it was last year, I believe. It wasn't all real estate agents in the local area were invited. Not that many showed up, to be quite truthful. But really, you're right, it's an education thing, and we're trying to do our part in that, right?
Thank you, Councillor McDonald. Councillor Ivan Doncaster.
Thank you, Deputy. Lloyd, on page, I think it's 19, about your website, that information is only for your own tax account. You can't go in and look at your neighbor's assessment or anything of that nature, can you?
Well, the information on, if you put your PIN in,
Yes.
you can get all the information on your own property.
Yeah.
But there is certain information available on all properties.
Yes. Is it through your...
Through our website.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Resource forestry, is that locked in at a fixed rate right now?
Yeah, it's like the forest exempt, you mean?
Well, like my bill, I have a small piece of property, it's the same amount the last 3 years.
Yeah, you pay based on an acreage.
Yeah, but that's, it must be locked in, but the few years before that, it was increasing yearly, 1 year after another till it hit 2012, it's the same, 13, 14, and 15.
Are you talking about the assessment or the taxes
The
now?
assessment.
Oh, the assessment?
Yeah.
No, the assessment's not locked in on it. It's reviewed on a regular basis.
Okay.
If we see sales that are indicating to us that the forestry should be moving, then we'll move it.
So nothing in that area, maybe where I
Yeah,
live is
so-
moving, so it's just stationary.
Yeah.
I can use my own assessment bill, because I know there's a lot of people in the viewing audience may be in the same situation. Mine went up $5,500. Now, a piece of property sold maybe 2 or 3 years ago for $450,000, next, almost a half a kilometer away from me. Would that impact my increase this year?
Well, that piece was on the water.
Yes.
Right. You're not on the water, right?
Right.
So that's, we'd have two different rates, one's for water frontage and one for non-water frontage.
But why would mine go up $5,500?
Well, yours is just based on other sales that are happening, right?
Maybe there's none in the area, but it's
Well,
still
there's
up.
always some.
You sure?
There's always some. And you're just a great neighbor to live next to, right? So,
Okay, following that up, now, two properties just sold in my area in the last 6 months for $1 million each. Now,
you
what
live in a
kind of
pretty
impact-
rich neighborhood.
What kind of impact is that going to have on myself and my neighbors in the next few years?
Yeah. Well, what we do is we compare comparable properties.
It's like pulling teeth there, Lloyd. You're not giving me the answers I'm looking for.
Just tell them
It's
to
going to make
appeal.
a big difference in my tax bill and to my neighbors also. Is that correct?
It may not. It may not.
Can I take
I don't know what those properties are that sold for $1 million, but,
They're on the water.
so.
Okay. I was told that for you people doing the assessment, that it's a square footage on homes for replacement that you look at for the assessment. Is that correct, or or how is it like a home assessed?
Well, I mean, you always look at square footage in terms of, because what you're trying to do is, first of all, is to start out with a replacement cost for your property, right? But in the end, it all gets compared to sales, right? So that's just a very
There's only part of the puzzle.
beginning phase, right? Beginning of any assessment process.
At your meetings, have you ever discussed that the new homeowner be eliminated let them be on the cap right off the bat? We're discouraging a lot of new homeowners from building, you know. Like
Yeah,
Claire said they build a new home, and next thing they call you, how come we're not under the cap?
Yeah. Yeah,
But have you discussed it at your meetings?
we don't play a part in setting the legislation, so our job is just to administer the cap. So really, it's a provincial legislation, and it's, our hands are tied in terms of that
And
aspect
what
of
Claire
it.
said about people buying homes not realizing the cap is coming off, I was told that those real estate agents are supposed to tell those prospective buyers that the cap is going to be removed as soon as you buy it.
Yeah.
Have you heard that?
I mean, I never heard that, but I mean, certainly we encourage people to do that, and, I mean, I would also think that banks and the people that they're doing their mortgages with, I mean, they have a responsibility also, right? So,
Like Clarence talked about the time frame of the appeal. I've had one call 2 years ago. Somebody went to Florida at Christmas time, came back maybe in February, and theirs went up quite a bit, and it was too late to appeal. Is there a late appeal program?
there is a late appeal process, but it's typically, you have to sign an affidavit as to why you're late, and typically for it to be accepted, it's got to be, there's got to be due to like a sickness, or it's up to the chairman. But the great thing now, of course, is e-delivery, right? So if they get e-delivery and go to Florida, they can get their assessment notice.
They can, if I can add, they can't appeal through e-delivery, but they can certainly receive their notice and send it back in a much timelier manner. But that's one of the benefits of having e-delivery.
Thank you, Councillor Doncaster. We'll have Lloyd McLeod give you your appeal notice on the way out. Recognize Councillor Mayro.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I was out of the loop here for a little while, from 2004 to 2008, and when I came back in 2008, this was in my face, and I had, one of the first calls I got after the election was about their tax bill, and I had no clue what this was about. And I really felt like an idiot going into the appeal with them because I didn't understand anything about it, and it's been a really long educational time, and like, you can never educate the public enough about this, and I think you being here has to happen every year, because you'll capture different group of people every time, and there's changes all the time, and there's always questions. So what was the impetus for forming PVSC? Like, was that something that the province legislated had to happen, or, because I wasn't in, around here when that discussion was going on, and
Well, I
I
think
probably should ask the question long before now, but,
Well, we were a government department. I think what did happen in my time, first of all, was that at one time assessment was paid for strictly by the province. And then before we became PVSC, the bill for assessment got distributed to the 54 municipalities in Nova Scotia. So I think,
so it wasn't our idea. It
yeah,
was?
definitely
Yeah?
it was, yes. Yeah, I think
Okay.
the feeling was that if you're gonna pay for it, then the province is not gonna run it, right?
Oh, okay.
So, but, I mean, that's basically what happened. Assessment
Yeah.
was paid for by the province. It changed and it started to be paid for by the 54 municipalities. And then I believe the UNSM probably,
Well, and that's when they came up with the corporate view, and the governance is the board of directors, and their municipal and elected officials.
Yeah, I see
appointed
that in the
officials.
presentation, where
Yeah.
I never knew how it actually got started.
yeah.
Thank you for that. Just two other points. When someone appeals their tax bill, how long before they get the cap back? They lose the cap during the appeal, right?
No,
No?
no.
Okay,
No,
clarify
you
that,
only lose
please.
the only way you would lose the cap is if I bought your home. I
So
wouldn't
if you
get I
appeal-
wouldn't get the cap.
If you appeal and you don't win the appeal, you don't lose the cap?
No.
Okay,
No.
okay, that's, and how about, now on page 21, you mentioned that ownership remained within the family is a reason to be eligible for the cap. So clarify that for me a bit. So like your question, your response to Councillor Dettridge's question about selling property to
It
a
has to
nephew.
be a son or a
doesn't-
daughter.
Son or a daughter. Oh, okay, that's the limit of it. Can't be siblings or,
I'll just clarify that with Diane.
Actually, it's a spouse, child, grandchild, great-grandchild, parent, grandparent, and brother and sister.
oh, that's pretty wide spread,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, that's all I have, thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Rowe. Second time around, I think we have to go to Claire Deathridge, to Councillor Deathridge. Sorry, Ivan, you have to go to the end.
Sorry. Thank you. I'll be very quick. There was a recent study done in the last 2 years by Enid Slack and Harry Kitchen, and that pretty well agreed with the whole province that the way we were doing business as far as the cap was not working. They did make some recommendations in that, but I don't think there's anybody out there that had enough guts to even go any too much further with that. But I would like to ask Marie just to speak to that after the fiscal review and everything that was done. Was there any more follow-up on that? Because I can't remember, or maybe Clarence knows.
The cap actually was out of scope for fiscal review, so we didn't talk about the cap. But the study that you're referring to, the reference was to, again, phasing it out, but that went back to the UNSM. I'm not sure where the province is with that. I don't see any movement on the cap. We spoke to the Deputy Minister last week, and I can't see any movement in the cap at all. I would like to just expand a little bit on what Eldon says, if that's okay. It's more prevalent in Cape Breton, the effects of the cap, because in areas where the economy is better, the houses are selling anyway and they're moving so that the cap's coming off, it's going back on, and it's not as prevalent. In Nova Scotia, the average exempt assessment is around 12%. In Cape Breton, it's 21%. So we are really feeling the effects of the cap more than anybody else in Nova Scotia. When you talk about new homeowners, I am shocked that nobody has challenged it legally, and I suspect they probably don't have the resources or the funding to challenge it legally, because it's so inequitable now that it's unbelievable that somebody hasn't, taken that to task or taken that to court, but, so Cape Breton is feeling the effects of the cap most. So our hands are tied when the provincial government talks about tax effort and why aren't we moving on our tax rate. How do you move on a tax rate when you have people who are paying, you know, for new homes or new home builds higher than they, you know, way higher, 30 to 40% higher than they should be. So how do you increase the tax rate for those people? So our hands are really tied in terms of our tax effort.
Thank you. Councillor Ellen McDonald.
Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor. Just a few more comments, I guess, in regards to the bringing up of the report that was done and submitted to the province. And I will make some comments, but I would like your own opinion, I guess, from the PVSC's point of view of what you thought of the study or how you feel that needs to be presented in regards to your opinion to the province on that. In regards to the new home ownership and the lack of that happening, because it does stop people from building new homes, which creates problems in our economy. It's a train wreck. That's part of the train wreck. That train wreck's only going to get bigger if it doesn't get addressed. Hearing from Councillor Rowe on how the establishment happens, and maybe we should look at doing something the province does, and we should maybe download the expense to the province to pay for it instead of us. They have a very good track record of downloading expenses to us, and I've always had a problem with that, and always will have a problem with it. Just in reference to the 40 million that I referenced before with the lack of equalization funding, and of course the lack of funding from the residential assessment rate with the cap in place, if we were to acquire those types of funds, we could just imagine how much we could reduce our tax rate in the municipality so people were paying a fairer tax rate, and of course then maybe attract some business and attract new development in our community. But this does just the opposite, and it's shameful that it's continuing, and something needs to be done to address that. In regards to Marie's comments with legal action, I suspect she's probably right that people can't afford to take legal action because they can't afford to pay their increase in taxes. So if they can't afford to pay the increase in their taxes when they skyrocket from purchasing a new home, very unlikely they're going to take any legal action against it.
Thank you, Councillor McDonald. Councillor Ivan Doncaster.
Going back to what May and Claire talked about with transferring land or property to a spouse, what happens when somebody dies and their will the property? There's no sales transaction taking place there. So what happens in that case? If somebody dies and wills the property to
I guess it depends on who they will it to.
but would they be exempt though? You know?
It falls within that group of that I just,
Yeah.
it states.
They still won't be exempt.
Yes.
No, they'll still get the cap.
Will they? Will they be capped? Okay. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Speak to the mic, yes.
Yeah. Okay, then, on page 22, you talked about the qualifying sales, 1061, but underneath it is 3 bullets. Land valuation, building permits, you collect income and expense information.
Yes.
What's the income and expense information you'd be collecting?
Well, that would be the rentals for properties, how
On
much
that
they're,
section?
how much they're paying for the space they're leasing.
So
And
that's
then the
just,
expenses would be associated with the owner of the building and what his expenses
That's
are to
more of the-
operate that building.
that's just with rentals, and that's it.
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Lloyd.
Diane, just before we close, would you mind going to the mic, just to explain maybe to us which, as far as which relatives are covered and so on, would that be okay? That was one of the questions answered, maybe it might be. Maybe the central mic there, be okay? Because I know that is confusing to some residents. Put you on the spot.
Oh, no problem. It was spouse, child, grandchild, great-grandchild, grandparent, and sister, brother.
Thanks very much. Does
Okay.
that clarify? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, any other questions? I'm sorry, Kevin, Councillor Zachery.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. First of all, I want to thank Lloyd and Judy and Diane and Dave, is it? for coming along, and spending the time that they did on their off time, so to speak, I guess, to do us a huge favor here at such a crucial time of year when we get these assessments. Because as was mentioned earlier, a lot of people don't look at them until the tax bill comes in. And that's what I found important to get out there. And through you, Deputy Mayor, to Lloyd there. Lloyd, when somebody buys a home, they at no time thereafter qualify for a cap, is that it?
Not in the first year. They do,
Okay, so
they do
they
after
qualify-
that,
Okay, the second year after that?
yes.
And how does that equate in terms of a formula, or for instance, if it was a 2.4% the year before that was lifted, would that same amount go back on that
Well, it
property?
depends on the consumer price index, because it changes yearly, right?
Okay,
So,
Kevin, I think what you're trying to get at is if you were capped at 100,000
Yes.
and you sold and it went up to 140, the new owner in the next year does not go back to 100. He starts at 140 and then is based on...
minus whatever that
Yes.
consumer price index is?
Yes.
Okay, but there's a lot of people out there, somebody I spoke to just only a couple of days ago, didn't realize, they had bought a home a couple of years ago, didn't look at their assessment. I said, look at your assessment to see if you got your cap. And if you don't have it, then call the local office.
Yeah.
That's what's important, and it's now an educating process. We're all learning as counselors around the
Yep.
table on this whole thing. So, and it would be good to have this annual thing, you know, to present to the residents. And also, I'd like to note, Deputy Mayor, that for the viewing public out there, if you're talking to somebody about it tomorrow or the next day and they say, oh, I missed it, keep in mind these live streams, these recorded council meetings are archived, so they can go into it next week and look at this session and go through the process of what they're interested in, what component of the issue through PVSC. And with that, Deputy Mayor, I'd like to again thank the staff from PVSC. I'd also like to thank Kathy Gillis, the CAO of PVSC, for setting this up. And I'm sure she's probably tuned in online. And it's important to our municipality as well as all others. And again, I can't thank you enough. Thank you.
Thanks very much. That concludes the presentation. And again, thank you again, Lloyd and Trudy, for coming. And your phones will be ringing tomorrow, I'm sure.